Imagine the sound for a moment. A deep, visceral crack, rising from the Earth's core and shaking the air like metallic thunder. It's not the roar of a controlled demolition, nor the impact of a wrecking ball. It's the sound of a bite. A single bite that reduces a 2-ton car, with all its travel history and memories, to a compact cube the size of a suitcase, in less time than it takes to catch your breath. This isn't a dystopian scene from a science fiction film. It's the daily operation of an industrial crusher, the beating heart of a business that moves more than 200 billion euros a year in the shadows. Behind every skyscraper that disappears from the skyline, every commercial airplane that ends its life in a deserted graveyard, every merchant ship stranded forever on a beach in Alang, there exists a hidden ecosystem of steel titans, anonymous giants that don't build, but rather deconstruct our civilization. Their mission is to devour the past to build the future. Today we leave the surface and descend into the bowels of this parallel world. A universe where scrap metal isn't the end of the road, but the most valuable raw material of the 21st century. When scrap metal stopped being trash, there was a time, not so long ago, when an object's life cycle ended in the landfill. An old car, a broken washing machine, an obsolete refrigerator. These were simply waste, the last link in a linear chain that began in the mine and ended in a pile of rust. The post-World War II era, however, brought with it a scarcity of materials that forced people to look at those piles with different eyes. It wasn't a gesture of ecological awareness, but of pure economic necessity. Steel, copper, and aluminum had become strategic resources, and there, piled up and forgotten, lay an urban mine waiting to be exploited. The first entrepreneurs in this business weren't engineers, but scrap metal dealers who roamed the streets with handcarts, offering a few coins in exchange for any metal object. Their workshop was often a backyard. Their tools were hammers, chisels, and the brute strength of their arms. They manually dismantled engines, separated cables, and stacked sheet metal. It was slow, dirty, and dangerous work, but it laid the foundation for a revealing truth. Inside the rusted shell of a useless object lay invaluable materials. This was the foundational moment. The instant when scrap metal ceased to be synonymous with garbage and became a commodity, a secondary raw material. From the manual press to the hydraulic shredder. The initial response to the need to compact and handle larger volumes wasn't crushing, but compaction. The first scrap metal presses, which appeared in the 1940s, were relatively simple devices. Operated by screw or lever systems, they crushed car bodies and bulky objects to reduce their volume and facilitate transport. They were, in essence, a mechanical and powered-up version of the gesture of crushing a can with your foot. But the automotive industry was growing at a frenetic pace, and junkyards were overflowing with a constant influx of end-of-life cars. The closed box press, which created the iconic compact cubes, was a fundamental step. However, the process was still slow and required prior manual dismantling. The quantum leap came with hydraulics. The application of high-pressure fluids to generate titanic forces changed the game. Suddenly, it became possible to exert constant, controlled pressure of hundreds and then thousands of tons. This enabled the development of the shear press, a machine that not only compacted but also cut. It could snap axles, section engine blocks, and split chassis as if they were dry branches. But the true milestone, the invention that would give rise to the modern behemoth, was the hammer mill. Inspired by industrial mills, this machine abandoned the idea of cutting or crushing in favor of hammering, tearing, and pulverizing. A massive rotor, equipped with forged steel hammers that spun at devastating speeds inside a sealed chamber, received the whole objects, the components that define an industrial crusher. To understand the magnitude of these machines, we must dissect them. We are not dealing with a mere artifact, but with a complex industrial organism. First, there is the heart of the system, the rotor. It is not a simple shaft with hammers. It is a single piece of cast steel, which can weigh more than 40 tons. It is balanced with Swiss watchmaking precision, because any deviation from the 1200 revolutions per minute at which it spins would generate vibrations capable of destroying the machine from within. The hammers attached to it are not large nails. They are blocks of special alloy steel, with a tungsten and chromium content that makes them stronger than any material they will strike. Each hammer can weigh up to 200 kilos and is designed to rotate on its axis, always presenting a fresh cutting edge upon impact, and to retract slightly if it encounters an insurmountable object such as a complete engine block before resuming its attack. The crushing chamber that houses it is lined with wear plates, interchangeable Hadfield steel armor that absorbs the constant punishment. This armor can be 15 centimeters thick and must be replaced periodically, as it is literally the shield that contains the battle. The feeding system is another feat of engineering. It's not a simple chute. It's a reinforced conveyor belt, up to 3 meters wide, capable of moving 20 tons of material per minute. Often, it's preceded by an electromagnet-equipped grapple crane, which selects and deposits the objects with macabre precision. And all of this is powered by the nervous system, hydraulic power. Pumps the size of a truck's diesel engine generate a flow of oil at pressures exceeding 300 atmospheres, controlled by valves as complex as those on a space shuttle. This hydraulic network not only moves the rotor but also operates the gates, adjusts the position of the sorting grids, and lubricates every critical point under infernal heat. Finally, the brain. A computerized control center monitors bearing temperature, hydraulic pressure, rotor vibration, and energy consumption in real time. Any anomaly is detected and the system shuts down in milliseconds. How an entire car is reduced to sheets in seconds. The journey of a car from the moment it enters a shredding plant until it emerges as a pile of metal chips is a ballet of brutal forces, choreographed down to the millimeter. It all begins with reception. The car, already stripped of its tires, battery, and sometimes fluids, is placed by a crane onto the feed pile. There is no manual dismantling. No seats, plastics, or upholstery are removed. The entire vehicle, with everything inside, is the ingredient. The conveyor belt carries it toward the mouth of the shredder. This is an almost ceremonial moment of transition, the last second of structural integrity. Then, it crosses the threshold. Inside the chamber, the rotor spins with a deafening roar. The first hammers slam into the car's roof. The 1 millimeter thick steel of the hood offers no resistance. It curls, twists, and is flung against the chamber walls. The windshield shatters into millions of fragments that will later be vacuumed up as ground glass. The engine block, the densest object, is subjected to a barrage of blows. The hammers, spinning at a peripheral speed of over 100 kilometers per hour, don't cut it, but rather crack it, fracture it, disintegrate it into jagged pieces of cast iron and aluminum. The axles, the springs, the body panels, everything undergoes the same treatment. It's a process of accelerated decomposition, a mechanical digestion. The fragments, once reduced to a size smaller than the starting grid, fall through it. From local landfills to international ports, the journey of a piece of metal from the moment it is torn from its original form until it is reborn as a new product is an odyssey that crosses continents, and its starting point is as humble as it is ubiquitous: the authorized landfill or the yard of a local scrapyard. Imagine an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of a European city. Here, in a constant flow, arrive trucks loaded with factory debris, rubble from demolition sites, and compacted car bins from recycling centers. This is the first node of a global nervous network. The material doesn't stay here. It undergoes initial sorting. Clean steel is piled in one corner, mixed aluminum in another. Copper cables are stacked like metallic spaghetti. But this yard is not a final destination. It is a consolidation center. Each pile represents a calling card for the market. Specialized traders, tablets in hand displaying real-time quotes from the London Metal Exchange, roam these yards. They negotiate not only by the tonnage, but also by purity grade, alloy composition, and absence of contaminants. Once purchased, the material is loaded again, this time into 40-foot shipping containers or freight rail cars. Its destination is no longer local, but a deep-water port. They arrive at giants like the ports of Rotterdam, Hamburg, or Algeciras. There, gantry cranes, capable of moving containers at a rate of 1 per minute, deposit them into the holds of bulk carriers, ships designed to transport raw materials in bulk. These vessels, with names we rarely hear, like the Ocean Titan or the Iron Maiden, are the workhorses of this supply chain. They set sail for the major centers of consumption and processing: the steel mills of Turkey, the aluminum smelters of China, the copper refineries of India. The scrap metal fragment, perhaps originating from a discarded German dishwasher, has begun a journey of thousands of kilometers. Its value is no longer determined solely by its chemical composition, but also by the cost of maritime freight, import duties, and the demand from a factory on the other side of the world. How steelmakers depend on scrap metal. In the popular imagination, steel production is inextricably linked to mining. Colossal open-pit mines, trains transporting mountains of iron ore, and blast furnaces, where coked coal reduces that ore to molten iron. That is the primary route, the one that created the industry in the 19th and 20th centuries. But in the 21st century, a parallel and increasingly dominant route has emerged, the electric arc furnace route, and its sole fuel is scrap metal. Companies like Nucor in the United States or Celsa in Europe have built empires not on mines, but on guaranteed flows of high-quality scrap. The process is both cleaner and faster. An electric arc furnace is basically a giant vat lined with refractory material, into which tons of selected and compacted scrap metal are introduced. Then, graphite electrodes are lowered, generating a monstrously intense electric arc, with temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius. The scrap metal doesn't melt slowly. It melts almost explosively, becoming a bath of liquid steel in a matter of minutes. The key here is the quality of the feed. The scrap must be clean, meaning it has a low content of unwanted residual elements like copper or tin, which weaken the final steel. Therefore, shredded and magnetically separated fragments are the ideal input. Their homogeneity and relative purity allow metallurgists to fine-tune the alloy composition with exquisite precision, adding the necessary elements, chromium, nickel, molybdenum, to create specialty steels. The dependence is such that the financial health of these mega steel mills is measured by their ability to secure long-term supply contracts with the large shredders. An interruption in the flow of scrap does not mean a reduction in production. This means the complete shutdown of the furnace, with losses of millions of euros per day. This symbiosis has reshaped the industrial landscape. Steel mills no longer need to be located next to coal and iron mines. They are built next to major scrap metal generation centers, dense metropolitan areas, and key shipping routes. Metal exchanges and the price of destruction. While crushers roar and electric furnaces glow white, a parallel silent and digital universe exists where the value of all that physical effort is decided. This is the metals market, a world of screens, algorithms, and futures contracts that few see, but which influences the price of your car, your refrigerator, and the structure of your house. The London Metal Exchange, the New York Metal Exchange, COMEX, and the Shanghai Metal Exchange are the cathedrals of this system. Here, physical ingots are not traded in most cases, but rather promises, standardized contracts for a specific quality and quantity of metal. The price of grade A copper, aluminum of a specific purity, and bundled steel is set here in a constant dance of supply and demand that reflects the pulse of the global economy. What does this have to do with scrap metal? Everything. The price of scrap metal in any yard around the world is a direct derivative of these stock market prices with a discount. This discount, which professionals call the spread, covers the costs of collection, processing, transportation, and the shredder's profit margin. If the price of primary aluminum rises in London due to a disruption at an Australian mine, hours later, the price a scrapyard pays for an old aluminum window in Seville also rises. The market is incredibly sensitive and speculative. Investment funds, banks, and traders buy and sell contracts based on predictions about Chinese industrial activity, geopolitical tensions that could disrupt supply, or even environmental policies that incentivize recycling. This financialization of metal creates a fascinating phenomenon. Scrap metal stored in a yard is not just production material, it's a financial asset. An owner might decide not to sell their pile of copper scraps if they believe the price will rise next week, playing the market as they would with stocks. How millions of tons of scrap metal are transported. Moving mountains is a metaphor. Moving mountains of fragmented, scattered, dense, and often irregularly shaped metal is a daily logistical reality that challenges transportation engineering. The first challenge is density. Crushed scrap metal is heavy. 1 cubic meter of steel fragments can weigh more than 2 tons. A 40-ton truck is physically filled long before reaching its weight limit. That's why road transport is only for short distances, from the scrapyard to the shredder, or from the shredder to the port. For longer distances, rail is king. Special open-sided wagons with reinforced sides, called gondolas, are designed and loaded by enormous magnetic grapples in a matter of minutes. A dedicated freight train can haul several thousand tons of scrap metal out of a plant in a single trip. But the real feat of scale happens at sea. Bulk carriers, the world's largest ships after supertankers, are responsible for this global trade. Ships like the Capesize class, too large for the Panama Canal, with capacities exceeding 180,000 deadweight tons, are the ones that cross oceans laden with scrap metal. Loading them is a science. The scrap metal isn't simply dumped, it's carefully loaded to distribute the weight and ensure the ship's stability. Special open containers are used, or it's loaded directly in bulk into the holds. During the voyage, the material can settle and compact further. Unloading at the port of destination is a spectacle of coordinated strength. In ports like Izmir in Turkey, gigantic grab cranes, each capable of lifting 20 tons in a single grab, begin emptying the ship around the clock. The scrap metal falls into colossal piles that are then loaded onto trucks or trains bound for steel mills. The chain doesn't end there. For high-value metals, such as refined copper or specific alloy aluminum, transport is done in sealed containers, which offer security and traceability. Each container has a unique number, and its location is tracked by GPS from loading to unloading. Countries fighting over other people's trash. In a world of finite resources, scrap metal has ceased to be a waste management problem and has become a strategic national resource, and as such, an object of dispute, protectionism, and even conflict. This war isn't fought with tanks, but with tariffs, export quotas, and quality standards. Turkey is a prime example. As one of the world's largest producers of electric arc furnace steel, its industry depends almost entirely on scrap metal imports. Its voracious appetite makes it the world's largest importer, attracting flows from all over Europe, North America, and Asia. To protect its own steel mills and ensure supplies, the Turkish government has occasionally imposed non-tariff barriers, demanding extremely strict quality certifications or imposing quotas, which creates tension with its supplier countries. On the other end of the spectrum are countries like India, Vietnam, and Bangladesh, with their famous ship graveyards like the one in Alang. Here, the battle is for the right to dismantle the world's largest ships, a goldmine of high-quality steel that can exceed 40,000 tons per vessel. Countries like China, formerly the primary destination, have closed their ports to this type of marine scrap for environmental reasons, redirecting this lucrative business to Southeast Asian shipyards, where competition for the best hulls is fierce and often opaque. The European Union, for its part, is waging both an internal and external war. Internally, it is trying to keep its valuable scrap flows within its borders to meet its ambitious circular economy goals and reduce dependence on imports of primary raw materials. Regulations such as the ban on exporting certain categories of scrap outside the OECD aim precisely at this. Externally, it is fighting the illegal trafficking of electrical and electronic waste, which, under the label of second-hand scrap, is shipped to Africa or Asia, where it is dismantled under dangerous conditions, poisoning soils and people. The United States, with its enormous domestic generation of scrap, is a key player. Their decisions on steel tariffs, for example, immediately affect the global flow. If they make imported steel more expensive, local steel mills increase production, driving up demand and the domestic price of scrap metal, which in turn reduces exports and leaves steel mills on other continents thirsty. This Cold War over waste reveals an uncomfortable truth. In the 21st century, sovereignty and industrial security are not measured solely by oil or mineral reserves, but also by control over the flow of recyclable materials. Whoever controls scrap metal controls a fundamental part of the future production chain, and on this global chessboard, every ton of shredded material is a pawn, and every port a strategic square. And yet, even this global empire, with its transoceanic routes, financial markets and trade wars, had an Achilles heel. Because the more it grew, the more evident it became that devouring the world was not enough. The efficiency of shredding and separation had a physical limit. increasingly complex metals, microscopically precise alloys in electronic products, and the need to recover not only metals but also polymers and rare earths demanded an evolutionary leap. AI and robotic systems in material selection. The roar of the hammers hasn't stopped, but now it's accompanied by a new sound. The almost inaudible hum of high-precision servo motors and the soft click of pneumatic valves firing with metronomic rhythm. We've reached the frontier where brute force gives way to contextual intelligence. The third-generation shredder isn't a single machine, but an integrated ecosystem where fragmentation is just the prelude to molecular surgery. The process begins even before the material enters the shredding chamber. Hyperspectral vision systems scan the objects on the feed belt. These cameras don't see colors, they see chemical signatures. They illuminate the scrap with hundreds of wavelengths of light, from infrared to ultraviolet, and analyze how each material absorbs or reflects that light. A sensor connected to an artificial intelligence trained on millions of images can distinguish, in milliseconds, a piece of PVC from one of polycarbonate, or a 6061 aluminum alloy from a 7075, crucial differences worth hundreds of euros per ton. This information is translated into instant action. When the material, already shredded into fist-sized fragments, emerges from the screen, it is dispersed in a curtain onto a high-speed conveyor belt. This is where the magic happens. Banks of Delta robots, ultra-thin, articulated arms capable of performing up to 200 movements per minute with half-millimeter precision, line up on the belt. Guided by the same network of sensors, their end effectors, pneumatic grippers, suction cups, or even high-pressure directional air jets, are activated. With a movement the human eye barely registers as a flash, they pry a piece of copper from a mixed fragment, deflect a printed circuit board into a specific channel, or separate an ABS plastic cap from a tangle of wires. This robotic sorting process is not based on general physical properties like density or magnetism, but rather on the specific chemical identity of each fragment. The result is a material flow purity exceeding 98%, a level unthinkable with eddy current or density separation technologies. The shredder no longer produces a mixture to be sorted. It produces a data stream that materializes into perfectly segregated piles. When every metal molecule is worth money. Beyond mechanical separation and even robotic sorting, a horizon is emerging where the concept of shredding becomes obsolete. We are entering the realm of atomic and molecular recycling. The most formidable challenge is not household appliances or automobiles, but the mountain of electronic waste, mobile phones, laptops, and motherboards, containing a miniature periodic table, gold, silver, palladium, copper, tin, and traces of rare earth elements like neodymium and dysprosium. Here, conventional shredding is counterproductive, as it mixes these invaluable elements into an irremediably contaminated powder. The answer lies in hydrometallurgical and biohydrometallurgical processes of astonishing precision. Imagine a plant where finely shredded circuit boards are immersed in custom-designed chemical baths. It's not a generic corrosive agent. These are selective leaching agents, solutions based on cyanide, thiourea, or even weak organic acids, whose composition and pH are precisely controlled to attack and dissolve only a specific metal. A first bath, mild and at room temperature, can be designed to leach only the tin from solder. The tin-rich solution is filtered, and the pure metal is recovered through electrolysis. The remaining solid residue goes to a second, more aggressive bath at a higher temperature which selectively attacks copper. Then another for gold, and another for palladium. It is a chemical distillation process, where each element is metaphorically evaporated from the mixture and condensed in its purest form. But the cutting edge is even more surprising: bio-leaching. Scientists are using specific strains of bacteria such as Acidithiobacillus ferrooxidans, modified in the laboratory. These bacteria, inoculated into tanks with electronic dust, do not eat the material. They secrete enzymes and metabolites that act as chemical keys, selectively unlocking and solubilizing precious metals at room temperature, with minimal energy consumption and without generating the toxic gases of traditional pyrometallurgical processes. How tomorrow's satellites and rockets will be recycled. While we solve the puzzle of space debris on Earth, a new frontier of junk is accumulating above our heads: low Earth orbit. An estimated 9,000 tons of inactive material orbit the planet. defunct satellites, abandoned rocket upper stages, tools lost by astronauts, and millions of small fragments from collisions. This isn't just junk, it's an imminent danger to active satellite constellations and future space missions. But it's also an unprecedented business and sustainability opportunity. Space recycling won't involve bringing old satellites back to Earth to be shredded. The energy cost would be prohibitive, but rather reprocessing them in situ. The first mission prototypes, developed by agencies like the ESA and companies like Astroscale and ClearSpace, focus on capture and controlled deorbiting. But the next step is the Orbital Salvage Office. Imagine an autonomous mothership equipped with robotic arms and a compact processing platform. It approaches a decommissioned geostationary satellite. Its arms, guided by machine vision, dock with specific structural points and begin a systematic dismantling. First, they unfurl gigantic solar panels and cut them into manageable sections. These panels, composed of extremely pure gallium arsenide and silicon on an ultra-thin substrate, are a highly valuable material. The mothership compacts and stores them. Then, it accesses the main body, extracts the hydrazine tanks, a highly toxic but reprocessable fuel, and the propulsion systems. Finally, it dismantles the aluminum and titanium structure of the platform. None of these materials are brought back to Earth. They are transported to a Lagrange point, a gravitationally stable zone, where a future circular station would be equipped with solar furnaces. By using mirrors to concentrate sunlight without atmospheric attenuation, temperatures can be reached that are sufficient to melt aluminum and titanium. This recycled space-grade raw material would then be used to manufacture via zero-gravity additive 3D printing new structures, spare parts, or even new satellites launched from the same orbital station. How this industry is saving the planet. For decades, heavy industry and mining have been synonymous with environmental devastation. Gaping craters, rivers contaminated with cyanide, massive CO2 emissions. The metal shredding and recycling industry is generating the opposite phenomenon, a net positive environmental impact, a measurable reversal of the damage. The most powerful metric is the carbon footprint. Producing 1 ton of new steel from iron ore in a blast furnace emits approximately 2 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Producing that same ton from scrap in an electric arc furnace emits only about 600 kilograms, a 70% reduction. Extrapolate this to the 1.4 billion tons of recycled steel produced annually, and the number of emissions avoided is comparable to taking more than 300 million cars off the road each year. But the impact goes beyond carbon. Urban mining avoids the entire chain of destructiveness associated with primary mining. There is no deforestation to open mines, no earth moving that destroys habitats, and no acid mine drainage that poisons aquifers for centuries. Every ton of recycled copper saves up to 500 tons of waste rock that would have had to be removed and processed. Furthermore, modern shredding plants are almost closed ecosystems. The metallic dust and other materials captured by state-of-the-art cyclones and bag filters are not released into the atmosphere. They are compacted and sold as material for road construction or secondary metallurgical processes. The water used in cooling or cleaning processes is treated and recirculated in a closed loop, with zero discharge. Even the light, non-metallic fraction, the final residue from car shredding, which previously went directly to landfills, is now the subject of R&D for use as recovered solid fuel in cement kilns or as fill in civil engineering projects. This industry not only mitigates its own impact, but also acts as a sink for past impacts, capturing the materials we have already extracted and returning them. Who controls the information? Controls the metal. In the circular economy of the 21st century, the most valuable asset is no longer the metal itself, but the information about it. Every fragment, every ingot, every ton of scrap metal circulating the world generates a data trail. Its exact chemical composition, its place of origin, its processing history, its carbon footprint associated with recycling, and its final destination. Whoever controls, analyzes, and trades this flow of information will hold the keys to the kingdom. Thus, digital traceability platforms emerge. Startups are developing systems based on blockchain and molecular markers. Imagine that when a car manufacturer produces an aluminum door, It digitally injects a unique marker, a molecular QR code printed in the paint, or an alloy with intentional traces of an element that acts as a signature. That code follows the door throughout its entire lifespan. When the car reaches the end of its life and is shredded, advanced sensors on the shredding line read that code. Instantly, it's known that this specific flow of aluminum fragments originates from a particular model of door, with a known alloy and a documented environmental footprint. This aluminum, now labeled Grade A, Certified Origin Low Carbon Footprint, can be sold at a significant premium to a high-end bicycle manufacturer or an electronics company seeking to meet stringent sustainability criteria in its supply chain. The data also optimizes logistics on an unprecedented scale. A central platform aggregating real-time information from thousands of shredders, scrapyards, and ports can anticipate bottlenecks, optimize transport routes, and balance regional supply and demand almost perfectly, reducing costs and emissions. But the real power lies in prediction. Companies that possess this big data will be able to build predictive models about future scrap generation. They'll know that in 10 years there will be a peak in wind turbines reaching the end of their useful life, or that the transition to electric vehicles will generate a specific surge of lithium-ion batteries to be recycled. This allows for strategic investments in specific recycling capabilities years in advance. The business will no longer be just about buying and selling metal. It will be about buying and selling circularity certificates, guarantees of origin, and sustainability data. In this new market, the most powerful shredder will not be the one with the biggest crusher, but the one with the smartest algorithm and the most comprehensive database. Control is no longer exercised over mines, but over the flows of information that give meaning, value, and a future to every gram of matter that travels through the infinite cycle. At the end of the journey, we understand that the roar of the crushers and the silence of the digital markets are not the sounds of decay, but the heartbeats of a reinvented industrial metabolism. These machines, so brutal in their function, are actually the nurturers of a new era. Every car compacted, every airplane dismantled, every phone reduced to its components is an act of liberation. It frees materials from their obsolete form to grant them a new life, and it frees our planet from the eternal burden of excessive extraction. This multi-million-dollar business, born out of sheer necessity, has evolved into the most promising pillar of a truly circular economy. It's not an ecological utopia. It's a technical, logistical, and financial reality of devastating efficiency. The next time you contemplate the crushing beauty of a steel ball demolishing a building, or the hypnotic sway of an electromagnet over a sea of scrap metal, you're not seeing an end. You're witnessing the first and most crucial step in a perpetual rebirth. Because in this endless cycle, every ending is, in truth, a beginning.